There are several methods for lengthening stitches. The simplest one is just to use a separate strand of yarn and to manually knit the stitches whatever size you need them to be. But there's a better method once you learn to manipulate the stitch size dial and the holding position on your carriage. Let's assume that I want to use these 6 needles and these 6 and these for some sort of an elaborate texture that's going to require very large stitch sizes. But the background is fine on a normal stitch size. For example, a size 5 stitch in these areas, but I'm going to need as large as a size 10 in these areas. So what I'll do is knit each of these sections separately and rely on the stitch size dial to provide the differences. I want to knit just this first section on the right, so I'm going to hold all of the other needles and knit 1 row from right to left. Once those needles have knitted, I'll put them into holding position, back up the carriage so it's always starting on the right, and bring the next group of needles into a position where they can begin knitting, and change the stitch size so that they knit on a size 10. Knit those 6, hold them, and back up the carriage. Drop my dial down to a 5 for the next group of background stitches. Knit. Back to the 10 for the next group of pattern or texture needles. Needless to say, when you use bridging for whatever purposes, make sure you turn off your row counter first, because by the time the carriage has finished working from the right edge all the way to the left, every needle in this bed will have knitted only 1 row. There. Now, no matter what the row counter says, each needle has knitted once, and that's all I'd want registered. So what I'd do is just turn the row counter by 1 number and put my automatic counter back on to continue knitting. This is important because otherwise the numbers on here are going to lie to you. You'll think you've knitted much, much more than you actually have. Now I would cross my cables or twist my stitches or wrap them, whatever I needed to do, and continue knitting. The enlarged stitches are easy to spot against the plain background. If I needed to manipulate them, they would be a lot easier to handle than the size 5 stitches that the carriage formed. If they're not large enough, we can form truly giant stitches by combining hand knitting with the bridging technique. Once again, if I wanted these 6 needles to form larger stitches than the background areas, I'll treat them differently than I would the background. The background or the bridge areas will all knit on a size 5 stitch, but the 6 stitches in each group will be hand knitted. I'm going to knit the first section and hold it, and before I return the carriage, I'll hand knit the 6 needles all the way back to non-working position. They're as far back in their tracks as they can go, and this is the largest size stitch that I can form on a single bed machine. As long as they're all the way back in their slots, they won't knit. They're being held just as they would be if they were in the front position on the bed. Now, it's easy to see that the needles that were hand knitted are considerably larger. Those stitches are considerably larger than the background stitches on either side of them. When you bring needles forward, holding stitches that large, make sure you keep some tension on the knitting so that the stitches don't jump up in the hooks of the needles. Although not all stitch designs require lengthening, many do, and bridging is a method that I rely on over and over again. Now, let's take a look at some of my favorite hand-manipulated techniques.